Years had passed since Cal's journey to Earth, and the impact of his visit rippled far beyond what either he or Ethan could have imagined. On Scytheris, Cal had become a symbol of change, a living reminder that understanding others, even those who seemed so different, was worth the effort. His stories about humanity inspired his people to look beyond their own world, fostering a spirit of curiosity and openness. Cal often spoke about Ethan, describing him as someone who represented the best of what humans could be: thoughtful, honest, and willing to share knowledge despite the risks. He kept the lessons he learned close to his heart, about hope, resilience, and the importance of striving for something better. These ideas began shaping Scytherian culture in subtle but profound ways. Families started celebrating a new tradition called the Day of Connection, where they shared stories of other species and dreamed of peaceful coexistence among the stars. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ethan continued his work at the Arctic Station, though his perspective had shifted dramatically. The ornament Cal had given him remained on his desk, catching the light whenever the sun peeked through the icy clouds. It served as a constant reminder of the bond they had formed and the potential for understanding between species. Ethan found himself approaching his job with renewed purpose, not just as a monitor of signals, but as a guardian of the fragile connections humanity had begun to build. Claire noticed the change in him too. Gone was the quiet resignation she had once seen in his eyes. Now, there was a spark, a sense of optimism that hadn't been there before. One day, she asked him directly, "What happened to you, Ethan? You're not the same person I met years ago." Ethan smiled faintly, glancing at the ornament. "I guess I learned to see things differently," he replied. "Maybe it's not enough to just survive out here. Maybe we need to dream bigger, to believe we can do more than just protect ourselves." His words stayed with Claire long after their conversation ended. Slowly, she began to rethink her own views on humanity's place in the galaxy. Perhaps secrecy wasn't always the answer. Perhaps trust, even in small doses, could lead to something greater. Across the stars, news of Cal's efforts reached other civilizations. Word spread of an alien child who had dared to seek understanding instead of isolation. Some species were skeptical, while others admired his bravery. But one thing was certain: Cal's actions challenged the status quo, encouraging others to consider the possibility of cooperation rather than fear. One evening, as snow swirled outside the Arctic Station, Ethan received a message unlike any he'd seen before. It was brief but unmistakable. Asterisk, "Thank you, Ethan. Because of you, the stars feel closer." Asterisk. There was no signature, but Ethan knew immediately who it was from. A wave of emotion washed over him: pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of connection. He stared at the screen for a long time, letting the words sink in. For all its flaws, humanity had managed to leave a mark, not through conquest or power, but through simple acts of kindness and courage. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As the years went on, Ethan retired from the station, leaving behind a legacy of hope and curiosity. News continued to filter in about Cal's work, each report painting a picture of progress and unity. Humanity's reputation slowly improved, thanks in part to the bridges Cal had helped build. On a quiet night decades later, Ethan sat by a window in his small home, watching the northern lights dance across the sky. He thought about Cal, about Earth, and about the countless worlds spinning silently in the vastness of space. Though separated by unimaginable distances, they were all connected, bound together by dreams of a brighter future. In that moment, Ethan realized something important. Imperfection didn't mean failure. It meant room to grow, to learn, and to become better. And sometimes, amid the chaos and uncertainty, hope could shine brightest of all. The morning of Cal's departure arrived sooner than either of them expected. Ethan helped him prepare the spacecraft, ensuring it was equipped for the long journey back to Scytheris. Though Cal had grown more confident during his stay on Earth, the thought of leaving filled him with mixed emotions. He felt grateful for everything he'd learned, but also unsure about how to share it with his people. As they worked together, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Cal's presence had reminded him of something important: hope. Over the years, Ethan had become jaded, weighed down by humanity's flaws and his own failures. But seeing Earth through Cal's eyes had reignited a spark within him. For the first time in a long while, he believed that maybe humanity's imperfections didn't define them entirely. Once the ship was ready, Ethan led Cal outside. The Arctic air was crisp, and the sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. It was quiet, almost peaceful, a fitting end to their brief but meaningful connection. "Are you sure you want to go back?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. "You could stay longer if you wanted." Cal shook his head firmly. "I need to return. My family is waiting, and my people. They need to hear what I've learned." Ethan nodded, understanding. "Just promise me one thing," he said, his voice soft but serious. "Don't lose sight of hope. Even when things get hard, remember that dreams matter." "I won't forget," Cal replied, meeting Ethan's gaze. "And neither should you." With those words, Cal climbed into the spacecraft. Before closing the hatch, he reached out and handed Ethan a small object, the handmade ornament the elderly woman had given him. "Take this," Cal said, "so you'll always remember what I saw here." Ethan accepted the gift, his throat tightening with emotion. He stepped back as the engines roared to life, watching as the ship ascended into the sky. For a moment, its glow lit up the entire horizon. Then it disappeared into the vastness of space. Back on Scytherus, Cal's return caused quite a stir. His family rushed to greet him, relief and joy written across their faces. Mira hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You came back," she exclaimed. "I told you I would," Cal said, smiling despite his exhaustion. He spent the next few days sharing stories of Earth with his loved ones and the wider community. He spoke honestly about humanity's flaws, their conflicts, their greed, their mistakes, but he also emphasized their capacity for kindness, creativity, and resilience. At first, many were skeptical. Some argued that humans sounded too dangerous to trust, while others worried that learning about Earth might lead to trouble. But Cal remained steadfast. "We can't ignore them," he insisted. "They're part of the galaxy, just like us. And maybe, by understanding them, we can learn to be better ourselves." His words sparked debates throughout Scytherus, challenging old beliefs and inspiring new ideas. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. People started thinking about their own actions, how they treated each other, their planet, and the stars beyond. Cal's journey hadn't just changed him. It had planted seeds of change across his world. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ethan returned to his work at the Arctic station, though nothing felt quite the same. Every time he looked at the ornament Cal had given him, he thought about their conversations and the lessons he'd taken from them. Claire noticed a difference in him too. "You seem lighter," she remarked one day. Ethan shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Maybe I am." Years passed, and news of Cal's efforts reached Ethan in fragments. Through intercepted signals, he learned that the alien child had become a leader among his people, advocating for peace and curiosity rather than fear. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy improved slightly, thanks in part to Cal's influence. One snowy evening, as Ethan sat alone in the control room, he glanced at the ornament resting on his desk. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky, painting the darkness with vibrant colors. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt hopeful, not just for humanity, but for all the beings who shared the universe. Perhaps imperfection wasn't the end of the story. Perhaps it was just the beginning. The next morning, Cal woke up in the small quarters Ethan had prepared for him at the research station. The room was simple: a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the endless white expanse of snow, but it felt strange and new to him. For the first time since leaving Scytherus, he allowed himself to reflect on everything he'd experienced so far. Earth was nothing like he had imagined. It wasn't just the beauty or the chaos. It was the way they intertwined, creating something messy but alive. Cale thought about the laughter of children, the arguments in stores, the glowing Christmas trees, and the piles of trash left behind. Humanity wasn't one thing. It was many things all at once, and somehow that made it more real. Ethan knocked gently on the door before stepping inside. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his tone cautious but kind. Cale looked up, his large eyes filled with both wonder and confusion. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Everything here is complicated, but I think I needed to see it." Ethan nodded, sitting down across from him. "That's okay. Life isn't always easy to understand. Even we humans don't have all the answers." For a while, they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Cale spoke again. "Do you think humans will ever stop making mistakes?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope so. But even if they don't, I believe they'll keep trying. That's what matters, trying to be better, even when it's hard." Cale considered this. He realized that maybe perfection wasn't the goal. Maybe the act of striving for something greater was enough. It was a lesson he hadn't expected to learn, but one he knew he would carry back to Xitharis. Later that day, Ethan took Cale to meet some of the people living in the nearby town. At first, Cale was nervous. He didn't know how humans would react to seeing an alien, but everyone greeted him warmly. Children stared in amazement. Adults asked curious questions, and a few even offered gifts as tokens of friendship. One elderly woman pressed a handmade ornament into Cale's hands, saying, "Welcome to Earth. We're glad you're here." Cale felt overwhelmed by their kindness. These were the same humans who argued over gifts and polluted their planet, yet they could also show such warmth and generosity. It was confusing, but also beautiful. As the day went on, Cale noticed something else. Moments of quiet connection, a father teaching his child how to skate on a frozen pond, friends sharing hot drinks and laughter at a cafe, strangers helping each other carry heavy bags through the snow. These small acts of care reminded Cale of the spirit Ethan had described when talking about Santa Claus. They weren't perfect, but they mattered. By evening, Cale and Ethan returned to the park where they had visited the night before. The Christmas tree still stood tall, its lights shimmering against the dark sky. Cale walked closer, running his fingers over the smooth ornaments. "This is what humans dream of," he said softly. "Even when things go wrong, they hold on to dreams like this." "Yes," Ethan replied. "Dreams remind us of what we want to become." Cale turned to face him. "I think I understand now. Humans aren't just good or bad. You're both. And maybe that's why you're special." Ethan blinked, surprised by Cale's words. No one had ever described humanity that way, not even himself. In that moment, he felt a flicker of pride mixed with humility. Maybe Cale was right. Maybe being flawed and hopeful at the same time was what made humans unique. Before heading back to the station, Cale paused under the starry sky. He gazed upward, thinking of Xitharis and the family waiting for him there. His journey wasn't over yet, but he already knew it had changed him. Earth wasn't perfect, but neither was he. Perhaps that was the point. "Thank you, Ethan," Cale said quietly, "for showing me your world, and for trusting me." Ethan placed a hand on Cale's shoulder. "Thank you for coming. You've given me something to think about too." As they walked side by side through the snow, their footsteps left marks that would soon vanish. But the impact of their meeting would linger long after Cale returned home, to two worlds forever connected by curiosity, courage, and hope. Ethan led Cale into the warmth of the Arctic Research Station, where the air was dry and the walls hummed with the faint sound of machinery. Cale's wide eyes darted around, taking in every detail: the glowing screens, the metal surfaces, and the strange tools scattered across tables. It was so different from anything he had ever seen on Xitharis. Everything felt sharp, precise, and full of purpose. "Are you cold?" Ethan asked, noticing how Cal hugged his arms close to his body. The alien nodded slightly, still adjusting to Earth's chilly climate. Ethan quickly grabbed a thick blanket and draped it over Cal's shoulders. "Here, this should help." "Thank you," Cal said softly, his voice tinged with both gratitude and awe. He looked at Ethan, then back at the room. "This place, it's amazing." Ethan chuckled nervously. "It's just a research station. Nothing special." "To me, it is," Cal replied. His gaze lingered on a nearby monitor displaying weather patterns. "You humans build such intricate things." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had spent years studying data and monitoring signals, but now, seeing his work through Cal's eyes, he felt a strange sense of pride and responsibility. This wasn't just about showing off Earth's technology. It was about helping Cal understand humanity as a whole. Over the next few hours, Ethan gave Cal a tour of the station. He explained how they tracked storms, studied ice cores, and monitored changes in the environment. Cal listened intently, asking questions that ranged from practical to philosophical. "Why do you study these things?" he asked at one point. "Is it because you want to fix your mistakes?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "Partly, yes. We've done damage to our planet, and we're trying to learn how to repair it. But it's also about understanding. Understanding Earth, ourselves, and maybe even others like you." Cal nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's good. Fixing mistakes takes courage." Later, Ethan decided to take Cal outside again. They traveled by vehicle to a nearby town, where Christmas preparations were in full swing. Streets were lined with colorful lights, shops displayed festive decorations, and people bustled about carrying bags of gifts. To Cal, it all felt surreal, like stepping into one of the videos he'd watched back home. "This is Christmas," Ethan said, gesturing toward the scene. "It's not perfect, but it's real." Cal watched silently as children laughed, families embraced, and carolers sang cheerful songs. Yet, amidst the joy, he noticed other things too. Arguments between shoppers, overflowing trash bins, and advertisements flashing aggressively on screens. Humanity's contradictions were everywhere, impossible to ignore. "Why do they fight for gifts?" Cal asked, pointing to a crowded store where people pushed and shouted. "Isn't giving supposed to make them happy?" Ethan sighed. "Sometimes people forget the meaning behind traditions. They focus on having more instead of being better." Cal frowned, struggling to reconcile what he saw with the stories Ethan had told him. Was this really the same species that created Santa Claus? The same species capable of hope and kindness? As night fell, Ethan brought Cal to a quiet park blanketed in snow. A single tree stood in the center, decorated with twinkling lights and ornaments. Nearby, a group of children gathered around an elderly man dressed as Santa Claus, laughing and sharing wishes. For a moment, Cal felt a flicker of the magic he'd imagined. "They still believe," Cal whispered, watching the scene. "Even with all the bad things, they still believe in something good." "Yes," Ethan replied quietly. "That's humanity. Flawed, messy, but always reaching for something better." Cal turned to Ethan, his expression softening. "Thank you for showing me this. I think I understand now." Ethan smiled faintly, though he knew Cal's journey of understanding was far from over. What Cal had seen was only a glimpse, a snapshot of humanity's complexity. But perhaps that was enough for now. Perhaps seeing both the light and the shadows would help Cal find his own answers. As they stood together under the starlit sky, surrounded by the quiet beauty of winter, neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary. In that moment, they shared a connection that transcended worlds, a fragile thread of hope binding two very different beings. Cal's journey through space was anything but smooth. The small spacecraft, built with scavenged parts and makeshift technology, struggled against the vastness of the cosmos. Alarms blared as systems malfunctioned, and Cal had to work tirelessly to keep the ship on course. At one point, A sudden asteroid field forced him to swerve wildly, nearly losing control. His heart raced as he gripped the controls, sweat pooling on his brow. For a moment, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. But Cale didn't give up. Every time something went wrong, he reminded himself why he was doing this: to understand humanity, to see Earth for himself, and to find answers that couldn't be found in messages or videos. He patched up damaged circuits, recalibrated navigation systems, and even rationed his supplies when the food replicator failed. Each challenge only strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just a trip. It was a test of his courage and determination. Back on Earth, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Cale. Despite being ordered to sever communication, he checked his console every day, hoping for some sign of the alien child. Guilt gnawed at him. Had he abandoned Cale too soon? What if something happened to him during the journey? These thoughts haunted him, making it hard to focus on his work. Claire noticed Ethan's distraction and confronted him again. "You're still thinking about that alien, aren't you?" she asked sharply. "Let it go, Ethan. You did what you were supposed to do." "It doesn't feel right," Ethan muttered, staring at the floor. "He trusted me. I can't just pretend he doesn't exist." "Well, you have to," Claire snapped. "This isn't about you or your feelings. It's about protecting humanity. Do you really want to risk an interstellar incident because of one curious kid?" Ethan didn't respond. He knew Claire was right, at least in theory, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that Cale deserved more. Humanity wasn't perfect, but maybe it could prove its potential by helping someone who genuinely wanted to learn. Meanwhile, Cale faced another hurdle: loneliness. The endless stretch of stars outside his window was breathtaking, but it also reminded him of how far he was from home. He missed Nira's laughter, his parents' guidance, and even the comforting hum of Scythrus's environment. To pass the time, he replayed fragments of his conversations with Ethan in his mind, holding on to the lessons he'd learned. Hope, imperfection, resilience. These ideas kept him going when doubt crept in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Cale approached Earth's atmosphere. The sight took his breath away. From space, the planet looked stunning, a swirling mix of blues, greens, and whites, dotted with patches of light from cities below. It was beautiful, yet Cale couldn't ignore the faint scars visible on its surface. Smog over industrial zones, barren stretches of deforested land, and glimmers of artificial structures disrupting natural landscapes. As he prepared to descend, Cale's ship triggered alarms at an Arctic monitoring station. Ethan was the first to notice the anomaly on his sensors. His eyes widened as he realized what it meant. "It's him," he whispered to himself. "Cale's here." Ignoring protocol, Ethan rushed outside into the freezing cold, scanning the horizon for any sign of the alien craft. Moments later, a glowing vessel descended gently onto the snow-covered ground nearby. The hatch opened, and Cale stepped out, shivering slightly in the unfamiliar climate. His large eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in the icy plains and distant mountains. Ethan approached cautiously, unsure how to react. When their eyes met, Cale smiled weakly. "Hello, Ethan," he said softly. "I came to see Earth for myself." Ethan exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. "You actually did it," he murmured. "You're really here." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan extended a hand, inviting Cale to follow him inside. Despite everything, the risks, the doubts, the challenges, they both knew this meeting was only the beginning. Whatever happened next would change them both forever. Cale's bold idea consumed him. Every spare moment was spent gathering materials, studying star maps, and sketching designs for a small spacecraft. He knew it was risky, perhaps even reckless, but he couldn't shake the feeling that visiting Earth was the only way to truly understand humanity. The messages from Ethan had opened his eyes, but they weren't enough. He needed to see the planet for himself, to witness both its beauty and its flaws. Nira noticed her brother's growing obsession and decided to help. "What are you building?" she asked one evening, peering over his shoulder as he worked on the ship's blueprints. Her large, curious eyes sparkled with excitement. "A way to get to Earth," Kel replied, his voice low but firm. "I need to see it for myself." Nira gasped. "You're going to leave Scytheris. What if something happens?" Kale smiled faintly, ruffling her hair. "Don't worry. I'll be careful. Besides, someone has to find out the truth." Though Nira didn't fully understand the weight of what Kale was planning, she trusted him completely. Together, they scavenged parts from old machines, piecing them together into something that resembled a functional spacecraft. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but Kale believed it would be enough to make the journey. Their parents, however, were less supportive. When they discovered Kale's project, they confronted him immediately. "This is madness," his father said, his voice trembling with worry. "You don't know what you're getting into. Humans are unpredictable. You could be putting yourself in danger." "I already know humans are complicated," Kale argued. "That's why I have to go. If I stay here, I'll never understand them, or us. Maybe learning about Earth will help us become better too." His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. "We just want you to be safe, Kale. Please think this through." But Kale had made up his mind. No amount of pleading would change it. With Nira's quiet support, he finished preparing the spacecraft, loading it with supplies and tools for the long journey ahead. On the night of his departure, he stood outside their home, gazing up at the stars. Earth felt so far away, yet closer than ever before. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ethan continued wrestling with his own doubts. Claire had grown increasingly suspicious of his activities, forcing him to limit his communications with Kale. "This ends now," she warned during one of their tense meetings. "No more unauthorized contact. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded reluctantly, though his heart sank. Cutting off communication felt wrong, especially after everything they shared. But he knew there was no choice. If he disobeyed orders, he risked losing his position entirely. The next day, Ethan sent a final message to Kale. "I'm sorry," he wrote. "I can't talk to you anymore. It's not safe for either of us." Kale read the words and felt a pang of disappointment. Had he pushed Ethan too far? Was humanity really as dangerous as everyone claimed? For a moment, doubt crept back in, threatening to derail his plans. But then he remembered all the things Ethan had taught him: the kindness, the hope, the dreams of becoming better. Those lessons meant something, even if they came from an imperfect source. With renewed determination, Kale climbed into the spacecraft and powered it up. The engines hummed to life, vibrating beneath his feet. Nira stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "Come back soon," she whispered. "I will," Kale promised, giving her a reassuring smile. Then, with a deep breath, he activated the launch sequence. The ship rose slowly into the sky, leaving Scytheris behind. As he soared through the vast expanse of space, Kale thought about everything he'd learned, and everything he still didn't know. Humanity was a puzzle, full of contradictions and mysteries. But somewhere within those complexities lay answers worth finding, and Kale was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. Kale couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. The images of Earth's beauty and its destruction played over and over in his mind, like two sides of the same coin. He wanted to believe Ethan when he said humans were trying to do better, but doubt gnawed at him. How could a species capable of such harm also create something as hopeful as Santa Claus? It didn't make sense. That night, Kale sent another message to Ethan. "Why do humans destroy their own world if they know it's wrong?" he asked. His fingers hovered above the console for a moment before adding, "And why should I trust you?" Ethan read the question and felt a pang of guilt. He knew Kale deserved honesty, even if the truth wasn't pretty. Leaning back in his chair, Ethan stared at the ceiling of the cold, sterile control room. Outside, the wind howled across the barren Arctic landscape, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. He began typing slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Humans have always struggled with balance," he wrote. "We want progress, comfort, and power, but sometimes we take too much without thinking about the cost. Our planet suffers because of it. But not everyone ignores the problem. Many people fight to protect Earth and each other." Ethan paused, then added, "As for trust, I can't force you to believe me. All I can do is tell you the truth, even when it's hard. Humans are flawed, Cale. We make mistakes, big ones, but we also dream of becoming better. That's why Santa Claus matters. He reminds us of who we can be, not just who we are." Cale read the response several times, his emotions shifting between frustration and curiosity. Part of him wanted to turn away from Earth altogether, to go back to the simplicity of life on Scytherus. But another part, the part that had always been drawn to mysteries, wanted to keep digging. If humans were so complicated, maybe understanding them could teach him something valuable. Meanwhile, back on Scytherus, Cal's obsession with Earth started causing tension. His classmates teased him, calling him the human lover, and warning him that aliens shouldn't meddle in foreign affairs. Even his parents grew uneasy, urging him to focus on his studies instead of chasing answers from strangers across the stars. But Cal refused to give up. Every time someone told him to stop, he became more determined to continue. At the Arctic station, Ethan faced pressure too. Claire had begun monitoring his communications closely, her sharp eyes scanning logs and reports for any sign of unauthorized activity. One day, she cornered him after noticing an increase in signal traffic. "What exactly are you doing, Ethan?" she demanded, her voice icy. "You're risking everything." "For what?" "A science project." "It's not like that," Ethan replied, though his tone lacked confidence. "This alien child, he's curious. He wants to understand us. Isn't that a good thing?" Claire shook her head, her expression grim. "Curiosity can be dangerous. You know the rules. We don't interfere unless absolutely necessary. Humanity's reputation depends on secrecy." Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. He knew Claire was right, at least in part. Humanity's history was filled with moments of violence and exploitation, and revealing too much could put Earth in jeopardy. But deep down, he believed Cal was different. There was something pure about the alien child's desire to learn, something worth protecting. Despite the warnings, Ethan kept responding to Cal's messages. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on topics like morality, forgiveness, and the nature of hope. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, sharing pieces of his own life and struggles. He told Cal about growing up in a small town, dreaming of adventure, and eventually joining the research program out of a desire to explore the unknown. Cal listened intently, fascinated by Ethan's stories. They made humanity feel less distant, less abstract. For the first time, Cal realized that individuals, not just entire species, shaped the course of history. Maybe humans weren't all bad. Maybe some of them, like Ethan, were just trying to find their way. As days turned into weeks, Cal's determination only grew stronger. He began sketching plans for a bold idea, an idea that would change everything. If he couldn't fully understand Earth through messages alone, perhaps it was time to see it for himself. Cal's conversations with Ethan became a daily ritual. Every evening after finishing his studies and chores, he would rush to the learning console, his heart racing with anticipation. The glowing screen felt like a portal to another world, a world full of wonder and mystery. Through Ethan's words, Cal began piecing together a picture of Earth. It was a place of extremes, where beauty and chaos coexisted in ways he found both fascinating and confusing. Ethan tried to keep things light, sharing stories about holiday traditions, music, and food. He described how families decorated trees with twinkling lights and exchanged gifts to show love and gratitude. Cal imagined himself standing under one of those trees, surrounded by laughter and warmth. It sounded so different from life on Scytherus, where survival often came before celebration. Yet there was something undeniably appealing about it. But as much as Cale enjoyed learning about Christmas, his curiosity didn't stop there. He wanted to know more about humans themselves, their lives, their struggles, their dreams. One night, he asked Ethan, "What are humans like when they're not celebrating? Do they still act kind?" Ethan hesitated before responding. He knew the answer wasn't simple. Humans were capable of incredible acts of compassion, but they were also prone to selfishness and conflict. How could he explain that duality without scaring Cale away? After a long pause, he typed, "Humans are complicated. Sometimes we're kind, and sometimes we make mistakes. But most of us want to do good, even if we don't always succeed." Cale read the message over and over, trying to make sense of it. Mistakes. What kind of mistakes? He decided to dig deeper. Using the skills he'd learned in the Learning Center, he began exploring Earth's digital archives on his own. At first, he found harmless clips, videos of people singing, dancing, and playing games. But soon, darker images appeared. Scenes of war, protests, and environmental destruction filled the screen, leaving Cale stunned. His hands trembled as he watched footage of cities shrouded in smoke, oceans choked with waste, and crowds shouting angrily at one another. This wasn't the Earth Ethan had described. Where was the kindness, the generosity, the spirit of Santa Claus? Confused and upset, Cale turned back to their conversation. "Ethan," he wrote, "I saw things about Earth. Bad things. Is this true?" Ethan's stomach sank when he read the question. He had hoped to shield Cale from the harsh realities of humanity for as long as possible, but now there was no avoiding it. With a heavy sigh, he replied, "Yes, Cale. Those things are true. Humans aren't perfect. We fight, we pollute, we hurt each other. But we also try to fix our mistakes. That's why symbols like Santa Claus matter. They remind us of what we should strive for." Cale stared at the screen, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to believe Ethan's explanation, but another part couldn't ignore what he'd seen. Was Earth truly a place of hope, or was it just another dangerous corner of the galaxy? The next day, Cale shared some of what he'd learned with his younger sister, Nira. She listened wide-eyed as he described the wonders and horrors of Earth. "Do you think humans are scary?" she asked, clutching her favorite stuffed creature tightly. "I don't know," Cale admitted. "They seem unpredictable. But maybe that's what makes them interesting." Word of Cale's discoveries spread quickly through his community. Some viewed his fascination with Earth as harmless curiosity, while others saw it as a potential threat. His teacher, Lyra, pulled him aside one afternoon. "Cale," she said gently, "you must be careful. Not all species are friendly, and not all knowledge is safe." "I just want to understand them," Cale replied, his voice firm despite the doubt lingering in his chest. Back on Earth, Ethan faced challenges of his own. Claire, his supervisor, had grown suspicious of the unusual activity coming from his station. "Who are you talking to out here?" she demanded during one of her surprise visits. "You know we can't risk exposing humanity's secrets." "I'm handling it," Ethan assured her, though his tone lacked conviction. Deep down, he wondered if he was doing the right thing. By connecting with Cale, he had opened a door that might never close, and he wasn't sure whether that was a good or bad thing. As snow fell softly outside the Arctic station, Ethan stared at the blinking monitor, waiting for Cale's next message. Whatever happened next, he knew it wouldn't be simple. Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit control room of his Arctic research station, staring at the blinking monitor before him. The message from Cale had been unexpected, a strange yet fascinating interruption to his otherwise monotonous days. He read it again. "Hello, Earth. Can you tell me about Santa Claus?" It was simple, almost childlike, but there was something sincere in the words that tugged at Ethan's curiosity. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Contacting an alien was not something he took lightly. His job at the station wasn't just about studying climate patterns or collecting data. It also involved monitoring signals from space and ensuring humanity's secrets stayed hidden. But this message felt different. There was no threat, no demand, just a question from someone who seemed genuinely curious. Finally, after a deep breath, Ethan typed his response. Hello, Kel. My name is Ethan. I'm from Earth. Let's talk *. The reply came quickly, flooding Ethan's screen with questions. Who was Santa Claus? Did he really exist? Why did humans celebrate Christmas? Ethan chuckled softly at first, but soon realized the weight of what he was doing. How could he explain centuries of human tradition to an alien child? More importantly, how much should he reveal? Over the next few days, their conversations continued. Ethan described Christmas as best he could, painting a picture of warmth and cheer. He told Kel about families gathering together, exchanging gifts, and sharing meals. He explained that Santa Claus was a symbol of kindness and generosity, a figure who reminded people to care for one another. But even as he spoke, Ethan struggled with guilt. He knew he was glossing over the darker truths of humanity. The greed, the wars, the environmental destruction. For now, though, he chose to focus on the good. Cale listened intently, absorbing every word. To him, Santa Claus represented everything wonderful about humans. They sounded so different from the stories he'd heard about other species in the galaxy. Stories of conquest, domination, and survival at any cost. Could humans really be as kind as Ethan made them seem? But cracks began to form in Cal's idealized view when he noticed inconsistencies in the media clips Ethan shared. Between scenes of happy families and festive celebrations, there were glimpses of protests, pollution, and conflict. Why did humans fight each other if they valued peace and kindness? Why did they destroy their own planet? One evening, Cale decided to ask. Ethan, he typed, why do humans hurt each other? If Santa Claus teaches love and giving, why doesn't everyone follow him? Ethan froze. This was the moment he'd feared. The moment when Kel would start asking questions he couldn't easily answer. He glanced around the empty room, half expecting Claire, his stern supervisor, to walk in and shut everything down. Taking a slow breath, Ethan responded carefully. Humans are complicated, Kel. We have many emotions, love, anger, fear. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we also try to do better. That's why we have symbols like Santa Claus, to remind us of what we can be. Cale thought about this for a long time. He wanted to believe Ethan, but doubt lingered. Back home, his classmates and teachers grew increasingly concerned about his obsession with Earth. Some warned that learning too much about humans might lead to disappointment, or worse. Cale didn't understand their fears. How could knowledge ever be bad? His family noticed the change in him too. One night, as they gathered around the glowing hearthstone, his father spoke up. Cale, your mother and I are proud of your curiosity, but we worry. Humans are unpredictable. Are you sure you want to keep talking to them? Cale nodded firmly. I need to know more, Father. I think they can teach us something important. His parents exchanged worried glances, but said nothing more. Deep down, they knew there was no stopping him. Once Cale set his mind on something, he pursued it with relentless determination. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own doubts. Each message he sent felt like walking a tightrope. He wanted to protect Cal's innocence, but he also knew he couldn't hide the truth forever. Humanity wasn't perfect. It never had been. But maybe, just maybe, its flaws didn't define it entirely. As snow swirled outside the station windows, Ethan stared at the screen, wondering where this fragile connection would lead. On the distant planet of Scytherus, a young alien child named Cale sat hunched over his glowing learning console. The screen flickered with strange images and sounds from across the stars. His large, curious eyes scanned the data as it streamed in, capturing fragments of broadcasts sent into space by humans on Earth. Most of the content was confusing, loud noises, bright colors, and odd behaviors. But one figure caught his attention. It was a round-faced man dressed in red robes, laughing heartily as he handed gifts to children. This being went by many names, but the most common seemed to be Santa Claus. Cale tilted his head, intrigued. What kind of creature was this? Why did it give things away without asking for anything in return? And why were these small humans so happy around him? He tapped the screen, trying to find more information. The console responded by pulling up videos of decorated trees, glowing lights, and songs about peace and joy. To Cale, it all felt magical, like something out of an old story told by his elders. "Teacher Lyra," Cale called out, his voice soft but eager. "What is this Santa Claus?" Lyra floated over, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the dim light of the classroom. She glanced at the screen and smiled gently. "Ah, that is part of Earth's culture, a planet far away from here. They call this time Christmas, and Santa Claus is a symbol of giving and kindness. But is he real?" Cale pressed, leaning forward. "Does he live on Earth? Does he really bring gifts to everyone?" Lyra hesitated, unsure how to explain human traditions to someone who had never seen their world. "Well, some humans believe he is real, while others think he is just a story. But what matters is what he represents. He stands for hope and generosity." Cale wasn't satisfied. Stories were fine, but he wanted to know the truth. Was Santa Claus truly flying through the sky in a sleigh pulled by animals? Did he visit every home in one night? These questions buzzed in his mind like static electricity. That evening, after classes ended, Cale couldn't stop thinking about Santa Claus. He lay on his sleeping mat, staring at the ceiling of his family's dome-shaped dwelling. His younger sister, Nira, noticed his distraction. "What's wrong, Cal?" she asked, curling up beside him. "I want to know more about Santa Claus," Cale admitted. "He seems nice, like someone we should meet." Nira giggled. "Maybe he'll come here someday." Cale shook his head. "No, I mean I want to talk to him, or at least learn where he comes from." The next day, Cale decided to take matters into his own hands. Using the tools available in the Learning Center, he began searching for ways to contact Earth directly. It wasn't easy. The signals were weak, and much of the data was encrypted or garbled. But Cale was determined. He spent hours tweaking frequencies and rerouting transmissions until finally, he managed to send a simple message. "Hello, Earth. Can you tell me about Santa Claus?" Days passed without a response, and Cale started to lose hope. Maybe no one would answer. Maybe Santa Claus really was just a story. Then, late one night, a reply appeared on his console. It was short and written in plain text. "Hello, Cale. My name is Ethan. I'm from Earth. Let's talk." Cal's heart raced. A real person from Earth. Someone who might have answers. He quickly typed back, asking everything he could think of about Santa Claus, Christmas, and humanity itself. Little did he know, this conversation would open doors to secrets far beyond what he imagined. For now, though, Cale felt a spark of excitement, a connection to a distant world that promised wonder and mystery.